light had to be so regulated as to not to disrupt. Now think of that when you pass a homeless person lying in wet, cold mud, frozen in a cold winter, neglected and splashed by passing cars. That's the antithesis of treating human beings in the image of God. If at the present time we all know that millions of children die in Africa who could be kept alive from malaria by a mosquito netting that costs $10 and lasts for 5 years, that's $2 a year. That means millions of African children die every year whose life is not worth the 1/6 of a penny it would cost to pay for that netting per day over the 5 years. Think of what it means to live in a world which the UN estimated in 1996, that year, that 6 million children had died that year of the diseases of poverty that end with dysentery, diarrhea, dehydration, and death, who could be kept alive by a little clean water and oral rehydration tablets costing 25 cents a day. So we're living in a world in which the image of God is treated like it's not worth 25 cents a day or 1/6 of a penny a day. A direct contradiction to God, who has created images of God that says each one is worth spending millions of dollars just to keep alive for another week, another day. Aside from the moral will, think of the increase in wealth that we're going to have to create to afford the health care for every image of God. We'll come to the equality question. Again, these are painful and direct questions. If each human being is equal by dint of that, it means white, black, brown, it means male and female. And again, it's a very painful thing. I'll speak of an Orthodox Jew, the Muslims can speak for themselves. It's very painful to confront the fact that my tradition has in some of its most sacred sources clearly sources that don't treat women equally. Now, again, I give the same answer. They're different. They should be treated uniquely. I'm not in favor. My wife has taught me a lot about this. You don't have to have identical men and women. But that's an excuse that covers up the reality of the everyday reality that women die more often by the tens of millions throughout the third world because their lives are worthless. And the religion speaks and confirms, unintentionally or intentionally confirms those realities. So again, it's very painful as a religious person convinced of the authority of the past that I have to wrestle with this question, but that is the task of taking seriously a world in which human beings are treated as equal. And one can go down the line with the issue of uniqueness too. Uniqueness means no stereotyping. No stereotyping. Uniqueness means respect for the diversity of people that in the end they may have a different experience of God in mind. And although I've been convinced it's the final and truthful revelation that I possess, I've come to accept the reality that as their minds and their hearts are different, maybe God loves them enough to reveal and to act in their community differently than God acts in mine. That's the unfinished task. And I want to thank the Crown Prince for another thing. My teacher, who I ended up disagreeing with, originally opposed dialogue, or salvation, one of the great teachers of the 20th century in Orthodox Judaism, insisted that he would accept dialogue on social economic issues, but not on theology, because theology was too private. He was afraid there would be a kind of a dilution, homogenization of the different theological positions. I came to disagree with that, but I came to see there was a great truth in that which the Crown Prince has called their attention to. Particularly for conservative people, but really for everybody. It's easier, it's less problematic to start with theology, with economy, with doing good, with helping each other. That much easier entering together no matter what the traditional background. And as we build those connections and as we come to understand each other, then the religious understanding, the new respect for the diversity. When I began to, one of the most moving historical experience of my life was to be taken to a dialogue in Sri Lanka in 1975 and to encounter in the backwoods of Sri Lanka a Christian community of famous, celebrity, wealthy people from Norway who had given up that life to follow Christ as they understood it, to go into the backwoods of Sri Lanka and to care for brain-damaged children. It's extremely moving to me to realize that I hadn't grasped this, because I was so turned off by the whole image of taking up the cross and glorification I thought of crucifixion. To realize that some people were so moved by this image that they literally sacrificed their lives to take care of children that were so useless they could not respond back, that their own parents abandoned abandoned them in their poverty and their struggle. And they came and gave up wealth and celebrity to take care of them 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no attention and no response back from the children, let alone the rest of the world. Very important to understand that there were experiences of God in other communities that even jarred me, that were profoundly inspiring, of great religious sacrifice, and that I had to come to understand that I did not exhaust God's revelation in my community. Third observation. So that's an unfinished task. To drop the stereotypes of business, to drop the stereotypes of religion, and to work together to begin to cure poverty, because poverty in turn means enabling the dignity, and enabling the dignity frees people to worship God as they should. Third comment about pluralism. Pluralism is about limits, and again we have to struggle to see this. It's about limits. It's not about relativism. It's not that religion is less important, therefore we can afford to accept all religions. It's not that religion is less important, therefore it's not worth fighting about. Even if I believe I have 100% of the truth, what pluralism says, I've come to understand if I have 100% of the truth, it doesn't mean I've exhausted God's truth in my community. It means even if I'm convinced I'm 100% right, and now I'm a little less convinced of that, I still make room for the others because they have the right and the dignity to choose, even if I think their way is mistaken or wrong, as long as it's not evil or attempting to destroy or hurt others. Similarly, I've come to see, if I as a Christian believe that God uniquely in my religion, in my faith, became flesh incarnate in my community, that does not mean that God stopped being present in the Jewish community or refused to appear further through the prophet in the Islamic community. It means that I, as a Jew, even though I'm convinced that there was a time when Jews had unique presence of God in the covenant, in their community, that did not mean that God did not further reveal, participate, send prophets, so others may understand God, others may come to God, others may feel that direction in their own lives, in their own community, in a very different culture, in a very different setting. And of course, even if I, as a Muslim, believe that God has given the final truth in the Quran and the final prophet in Muhammad, that does not mean that God thereby insisted that Jews have forfeit or that Christians never experience anything other than a secondary revelation.